So Act 1, Scene 4 is kind of short, right? Have your study guide out too, because then that way, if there's anything on the study guide that you want me to talk about, I can help you add to your notes. You're supposed to read Scene 4 and 5, which mainly have to do with the ghost. So Scene 4 on page 22 is where they're waiting around, right? It's midnight, and you get these lines so that you can get some information about the setting, right? In a play, the characters have to set the scene for you. They have to say stuff like, oh, it's cold out, brr, right? So that you get the idea that they're outside, that it's nighttime, and so on and so forth. So they have to set the scene. There's a discussion also on page 22 of where we get the idea that the king is having a party, right? Right around line 8 or so. There's some trumpets and celebration noises and things like that. And Hamlet says that the king is keeping wassail. And if you look at the footnote, that means that they are having a party. Probably to celebrate the wedding, right? Or the announcement of the wedding or whatever. They're drinking. Draft of Rhenish is alcohol, so they're getting drunk. And there's supposed to be a little bit of a contrast there, right? I would make a note about that. There's a contrast between Hamlet, who's trying to meet up with the ghost. That's a very serious kind of endeavor. And then within the castle, there's a party going on. And when we finish Scene 5, we realize just how ironic that is, because his murderer is there partying while Hamlet's trying to talk to the ghost and find out, what the ghost wants. There is a little bit of a conversation that they have about people. Let me see. The ghost shows up, right? Hamlet has a little side part where he's talking about how sometimes people get addicted to things, right? And then the ghost shows up. We were expecting that, right? It's the 4th night in a row. But the ghost doesn't speak to Hamlet right away. Why not? Yeah, maybe the ghost doesn't want to say anything in front of Horatio and the guards and all those other people that, clearly in the previous times that the ghost has shown up, he hasn't said anything to any of those people. And the ghost, later in the scene, starts beckoning Hamlet to come with him, right? Like with his hand gestures. You can see that there on line 57. But Hamlet wants to go with the ghost. Obviously, that's his whole purpose for being there, is to find out why the ghost is appearing. But Horatio and Marcellus do not want him to go with the ghost. On line 63, Horatio even says, "Do not, my lord," when Hamlet says, "I'll follow it." What's their concern? Right. What if this ghost is really a demon in disguise and is there to damn you to hell? Or what if it tempts you toward the flood, Horatio says on line 69. Or to the dreadful summit of the cliff that beetles o'er his base into the sea. You don't know why the ghost is here. Maybe it's legitimate, maybe he's got a reason to address you, or maybe he's there to trick you. So be careful. I think in this sense we start to understand a little bit about the relationship, right, between Horatio and Hamlet. HH, I'm going to abbreviate, right? How would you describe their friendship based on that scene, that part of the scene? BFFs? It's a bromance? Well, definitely he's looking out for him. He's concerned for him. If somebody's truly your friend, then you're going to voice whatever concern you have about their safety.
What is that word above the HH?
Relationship?
Oh, okay.
Well, I'm trying to talk and write at the same time, so I do my best. What if it assumes some other horrible form, he says, that's going to drive you into madness? There is a motif of madness in this play. We'll talk about it also at the end of scene 5. And they mean madness like insanity, right? Hamlet says, no, I'm going to go after the ghost. I'm going to follow it. But they stop him physically. How do I know that Marcellus puts his hands on Hamlet to stop him besides the picture on the next page? Hold off your hands, right? He's like, let go of me. Yeah, very good. And then we've got the picture there. You can see that Marcellus has his arms, like literally, they're wrestling practically, right? And Hamlet is straining to go with the ghost. The ghost is pointing, no, let's go over here, have a private conversation. What does Hamlet have to do to get Marcellus to let go of him? Threaten him, yeah. He says, my fate cries out. That's an interesting line, right? I'm destined to go and talk to this ghost. This ghost is here for me. And makes every artery in my body as hardy as the Nemean lion's nerve. That's a reference to mythology. You have a footnote on that. Hercules killed the Nemean lion and wore its body and its head as a hat. I don't know if you've ever seen that image of Hercules with a lion skin on his body. But that's the Nemean lion. It's a super hardy lion, and he ends up killing it. So he has to say, unhand me, or I'll make a ghost of him who doesn't. So he literally has to threaten Horatio. So he's pretty determined to go with the ghost. Even though they're just trying to protect him, he does threaten them, and it's pretty violent. In a few minutes, we're going to watch a scene from the Zeffirelli version. Well, actually, we'll watch all of Act 1. And you could see that they try pretty hard to get him to stop, but Hamlet has decided he's going to go with the ghost. And he says, you see this line right here, this dash on line 86? He says, I say away. He's talking at that point to Marcellus and maybe also Horatio. But this line right here, whenever you see a long dash like that, what it is a shift in audience. He's talking first to the guys that are holding him back, and then there's a long dash, and he says, go on, I'll follow thee. Who's he talking to there? The ghost, yeah. So when you see that, it's a way for the actor to know that they're not still talking to that same person. Now they're talking to somebody, the other person on stage, and you have to kind of think about what are they saying and who are they saying that to. Bless you. So Hamlet and the ghost leave the scene, but that's not the end of the scene because Horatio and Marcellus are still concerned. Just because Hamlet goes with the ghost doesn't mean that they're not worried. And they're such good friends that they say, let's follow. Right? He says, let's just stay at a distance. We'll stay there. If the ghost does something to him, we'll be there to intervene and to help the situation. So they are going to follow him. And that's the end of that scene. Is there anything that I didn't talk about in that scene that you wondered about, or something from the study guide that I didn't really go over? I have the study guide in my face right here. By the way, the study guide is designed to help you read. I'm not going to be collecting it, but I'm hoping that you're finding it a good tool to help you when you're reading. Anything else from scene 4? Any lines? I know I skipped around a little bit.
What exactly was the character?
Was the character of what?
Character flaw.
Oh, he talks here about people like Claudius. If you want to go back to the beginning of scene 4. Question is, from the study guide, what's the character flaw that he notices? So he says down here at the bottom of page 22, this is when Horatio says, is it a custom for people to get drunk and stuff like that around here? And Hamlet says, well, kind of, but here's the real thing. He says, so oft it chances, on line 23, so oft it chances in particular men that for some vicious mole of nature in them, as in their birth, wherein they are not guilty, since nature cannot choose his origin, by the o'ergrowth of some complexion, oft breaking down the pales and forts of reason, or by some habit that too much o'erleavens the form of plausive manners, that these men, carrying, I say, the stamp of one defect, being nature's livery or fortune's star. So he's talking about how in some people, because it's in their nature when they're born, or some defect that they take on as they grow older, have like an addiction, right? And he says, I don't know why, but sometimes there are people who have that particular fault. And he's talking about the drinking that they're doing downstairs. Because, some addictions can be, or some behaviors can be, inborn in us, and some things we can learn and have bad habits. That's what he's talking about. So in this case, he's talking about too much drinking because they're partying downstairs. They can hear the noise and the music and all that stuff. But then the ghost interrupts them. I don't know, I think that's sort of directed toward Claudius, right? He's defective. We all know Claudius is defective in multiple ways, right? Good question. Anything else from scene 4? Listening guide? All right, so that brings us to scene 5, which we've been kind of waiting for, right? Because now the ghost is going to actually speak to Hamlet. What would you say is the first important thing that the ghost tells Hamlet? That he's what?
That he's suffering.
Okay, that he's suffering. He does, he says right here, I am thy father's spirit, right? So he identifies himself and says, I know I look like your dad, but I'm your dad's spirit. So it's not a demon. It's not, something in disguise to trick him. And you're right. He says he's suffering as a spirit, right? Because he says, doomed for a certain term, on line 10, to walk the night, and for the day confined to fast in fires. He can't even describe where he is. It's so horrible, he says. Till the foul crimes done in my days of nature are burnt and purged away. So that should be screaming purgatory to you, right? What's purgatory? It's like what? Catholics are Christians too, by the way. If you go around saying, I'm not Christian, you're saying you don't believe in Jesus Christ. That's a Valley thing, by the way, in case you didn't know. Anybody who believes in the Holy Bible and Jesus Christ is a Christian, right? I know that this might go against what you're learning in your church, but what you mean is Protestant, right? A Protestant is a non-Catholic. A Catholic is a Christian because they believe in Jesus. So I know that you're looking at me like I'm insane, but when you go other places and you use that terminology, people are going to be confused because it's a Valley thing. I don't know why. So people who say, I'm Christian, I'm not Catholic, that doesn't make sense to people elsewhere because Catholics are Christians, right? They believe in Jesus and the Bible and all that stuff. So it's just a terminology that they use in the Valley. And I mean, you can keep using your terminology. I'm just saying, be aware that if you go away to school somewhere or you move somewhere else, they're not going to use that same terminology, right? So we're talking about the Catholic religion. These people in Denmark are Catholic. So in the Catholic belief, purgatory is what? It's not hell.
You're in the middle of temptation.
It's a portion. It's a part of hell.
It's like an in-between place.
Right. Yeah. It's like an in-between place where you have to go because you have too many sins, and before you can go to heaven, you have to pay for those sins. You can see the word purge right in purgatory, can't you? Right there. He says, I have to stay here until the foul crimes done in my days of nature are burnt and purged away. So there's a certain amount of time that you have to do in purgatory before your sins are gone and you can go to heaven. Then that's the idea. It's not straight up hell, because if you go to straight up hell, then you're never going to make it to heaven. There's no way that you can make it out of purgatory. Purgatory is sort of like a sentence that you have to do before you have the option to possibly go to heaven. But he says, I can't talk about it, right? I'm forbid to tell the secrets of my prison house. But if I told you, it would stand your hairs on end, right? And chill your blood and make you stare into space. All right, what's the next important thing that the ghost reveals to Hamlet, besides the fact that he's being punished and is suffering? Yeah, he says, if you ever did love your father, here on line 23, then revenge his foul and most unnatural murder. Now, his refers to the ghost himself, right? He's talking about himself in the third person. If you loved your father, then you need to avenge him. Well, if you don't think that he died of, unnatural causes, then you wouldn't think that it was unnatural. But now the ghost is revealing that he was murdered. Right? That it wasn't a natural death. And the ghost even tells him who did it, right? Where does he reveal that?
Where is this from?
36? Right? 'Tis given out, well, I know, but the metaphor. 'Tis given out that sleeping in my orchard, a serpent stung me. So he's saying, they're saying that I was bitten by a snake, and that's what killed me. He says, I was bitten by a snake, all right, and now he's wearing my crown. Right? But know thy noble youth, line 38, the serpent that did sting thy father's life now wears his crown. So that's a metaphor for Claudius, right? He's not getting a very good reputation. He's, like a goat man and a serpent. I guess because of what he did, right? What's Hamlet's reaction to that?
My prophetic.
Well, I know he says, oh, my prophetic soul, but what does that mean?
He's like, I knew it.
I knew it. I knew it. So maybe Hamlet's a little bit eager to do this revenge. I mean, he already hates Claudius for the relationship that he has with his mother, right? So maybe it's like fuel to the fire. Oh, good, now I can kill him. I have permission from the ghost, right? The ghost gave me permission, and I can do all the things that I want to do to torture him. The ghost seems to agree with Hamlet that Claudius is incestuous and adulterate. We heard that in Hamlet's first soliloquy, right? But what's different between the ghost and his view of this relationship between Claudius and Gertrude and how Hamlet sees it is that Hamlet focuses more on Gertrude. Why? This is mom. She cheapened herself, he thinks, by marrying Claudius. What else? He's concerned about her happiness, and he just can't believe how quickly it happened. The ghost seems more concerned with Claudius, right? The ghost seems to be thinking that Claudius seduced her. A wicked wit and gifts that have the power so to seduce. He talks about that. He won to his shameful lust the will of my most seeming virtuous queen. In other words, Claudius used his smooth moves to convince Gertrude to be with him. Smooth criminal. We could redo the song, right, for Claudius. Like a little music video. What the ghost doesn't tell us, and we're wondering at this point, is when did that happen? Like, did Claudius win with his shameful lust the will of Gertrude before he killed old Hamlet? Or after? There's a difference, right? Because if it was before, that means that Gertrude and Claudius had a thing going on behind old Hamlet's back when he was alive. And she might have known about the murder, or condoned it, or helped in some way. If he sweet-talked her after the death of old Hamlet, then she might be a complete innocent in the whole thing. Right? That he just moved in real swiftly and, talked her into being his wife. But we'll never find that out in the play. It's never revealed when that happened. And that's why I say that whoever plays the character of Gertrude, that actress has some choices. Because the play never verifies when their love affair started, she could be a mastermind, or she could be an innocent. Like, in her grief, she didn't know what to do. His shoulder was there. He hugged her. Something happened. Sparks flew. Let's get married. Okay. And all that stuff, right? So we won't ever know. Make a note about that right here where I put the star on line 45 there. We'll never know when that happened. We know that it happened, but we don't know. The ghost never reveals whether that happened before or after his death. We do get a little bit of a summary about what supposedly happened in his death, right? Claudius poured some poison into his ear. That's new. That's new, right? New method of death. Why would that method of death be preferable to to say stabbing him in the heart or... Okay, it's more secret. Yeah, more hidden. Because what do they decide happened to old Hamlet? That he was bit by a snake. Because he's got like this crust that grows all over his body from the venom, they decide. But it wasn't venom, it was poison that was poured into his ear on purpose. And he says, very quickly, swift as quicksilver, this is on page 27, it coursed through the natural gates and alleys of the body with sudden vigor, and then it curded, like droppings into milk, like cottage cheese. It turned his blood into, it congealed his blood. Well, that's going to kill you. Your blood's not moving in your body anymore, right? And it's solidified. And then his body started to crust over. Most laser-like with vile and loathsome crust all my smooth body. So from that evidence, they just assumed that it was a snake, since he was sleeping in an orchard. It would, that's where snakes are, so. But that's not really what happened. So he reveals the true method of his death there to Hamlet, and he says, the worst part of it isn't even that. The bottom of 27, he says, thus was I sleeping by a brother's hand of life, of crown, of queen at once dispatched. I lost all three of those things all at once while I was asleep. And I woke up and I was a ghost. That must suck, right? And I didn't even have time to confess my sins. If you're on your deathbed, you have the opportunity to confess your sins, be forgiven, and you can have last rites, and you can go to heaven. So even if you have a bunch of sins on your head, if you confess them, then you can make it right. But because he was killed in his sleep, he never had the chance to do that. How many sins do you think are on a king's head? A lot, because of wars and, decisions, hard decisions that they have to make. So he says he had to go to his death unhoused, disappointed, unannealed. This is the top of page 28. No reckoning made, but sent to my account with all my perfections on my head. Oh, horrible. Oh, horrible. Most horrible. I guess that's a good excuse for going to confession every week, right? Take care of your business. He seems to be worried about the incestuousness of their relationship. He even mentions it just like Hamlet did. There's some echoes in what the ghost says with what Hamlet says in his soliloquy, right? He's begging Hamlet, don't let the royal bed of Denmark be a couch for incest. You have to do something about it. And there's an urgency about that, right? One catch, the ghost says. What's the catch? Right. I do not want you to punish your mother. He doesn't say why, except that he says, let her own guilt prick her soul, right? He says right here, taint not thine, 85, taint not thy mind, nor let thy soul contrive against thy mother aught. Aught means like it all. Leave her to heaven, and to those thorns that in her bosom lodge to prick and sting her. Let her deal with her own decisions. Well, that's kind of nice of him. He only has to kill one person. Imagine how horrible it would be if your ghost dad told you you have to go and kill your mother. It's one thing to kill your nasty uncle, but to kill your mother that you love is kind of a tough one. So the ghost sort of lets him off the hook and says, I don't want you to worry about punishing your mother. Your job is to punish your uncle. And then here comes the sun, and Hamlet has a little, this is his second soliloquy. Let's mark that, starting the bottom of 28. You're going to work with that for your homework. But it's definitely different than his first soliloquy, because a lot changes with the ghost. Continuing on page 29, after he has his little soliloquy, then Horatio and Marcellus show up, and they have a little talk. They're happy that he's still alive, and so on and so forth. What does he reveal to them? What does Hamlet reveal to Horatio and Marcellus? What? Yeah, he says, I can't tell you what the ghost told me, but he says, swear that you won't tell anybody what you saw tonight. Right? He says at the bottom of page 30, line 153, never speak of this that you have seen, swear. He's got his sword, like he wants them to put their hand on his sword and swear to him that they won't say that they saw the ghost or that Hamlet was speaking to a ghost or anything. Because Hamlet wants to keep the element of surprise. If Claudius finds out that Hamlet knows about him being a murderer, I feel like Claudius is just going to have him killed, right? So he tells them, I need the element of surprise while I think of a plan, so don't tell anybody about this situation. The ghost even encourages them to swear. Swear, he says, from the air and below the stage. They do swear, and Hamlet says on the last page of the scene and the act, one thing that helps us into Act 2. He says, one thing I want you to know, he says, that I will probably be putting on an antic disposition, line 171. By antic disposition, he means I'm going to be acting weird. He's already got a kernel of a plan to get his revenge. And it's going to start with him pretending to be loony. Because he figures if he pretends to be crazy, then he can do and say things that people will go, oh, it's just crazy Hamlet. He lost it when his dad died. And he might be able to get away with things longer and weird behavior, and he could find himself in places where he's trying to find out information or trying to do things to Claudius. So that antic disposition is where he says he's going to start acting mad crazy, right? So don't be surprised if I start doing that. It's a little bit of the beginning of his plan. Because to get his revenge, he's going to have to plan it out. At the very end, he says, the time is out of joint. O cursed spite that I was ever born to set it right. What's it, do you think? What's he got to set right? The death of his father, yeah. The death of old Ham. So it seems like he's going to take up this goal that his dad set for him to kill Uncle Claudius. So if all of that is exposition, then Act 2 ought to be about how he's going to go about it. Right? Leading to the climax of whether he does it or he doesn't. Is there anything in Scene 5 that you want me to talk about some more from your study guide or something that you noticed that you have a question about? Because I know that I go through it, kind of quickly.